Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas. I'm Scott Hambrick.
I'm Karl Schut.
And today on the Online Great Books podcast, we're going to talk about a book that Karl's been wanting to read. Not because it's any good, but... No, wait a minute. That's next week. Which one when we read Terry Pratchett?
You're going to love that book.
I think I will. But this week we're going to read some essays by one Leo Strauss on a forgotten kind of writing, Esoteric Teaching, and then Persecution and the Art of Writing. 3 little essays kind of centered around the same set of concerns that Uncle Leo and I share. Next week we're going to read, what is it?
Terry Pratchett is a treasure if you haven't discovered him. The one that we're going to do is called Going Postal. And I really don't know how to describe it, except it's about the resurrection of a post office in a fantasy world that is a disc that is supported on the back of 4 elephants on the back of an enormous space turtle. And it all makes perfect sense.
Makes as much sense as anything.
I'd be surprised if you didn't like it.
Yeah, I think I'll enjoy it.
We'll see.
Yeah, it makes as much sense as anything. It was 14 below zero when I woke up Tuesday morning. I don't know.
Yeah.
Rolling brownouts.
It's cold here, but it's supposed to be cold here. This is just another February. We've had mild Februaries for the last few years.
Right.
And now we're just getting hit in the teeth like it used to be.
Yeah. It's true.
I've got 5 feet of snow outside my door. If it snows again, I don't have any place to put it.
Karl, I did a podcast appearance the other day. Let me see if I can go dig this up. I did a podcast called Primer with a guy named Charlie Thornton. A fan of the great books and a nice guy. Had a good conversation with him. I tried to not be too curmudgeonly. I don't know if I succeeded. I was pretty sour that day. Poor Charlie. But he sent me a song that he wrote called Achilles, and it's about him reading the Iliad. And I just want to play a little chunk of it. I'll have to send this to Brett so he can get this in. I asked Charlie if it was okay if I played it on the air. I'm proud of him. He did a good job.
In a quarter of an hour, I will board the 405. And 40 pages later, I'll walk into your life. We'll pick up all the pieces that always make you cry. And still Achilles rages on and on. Now it's dinner and a movie, yeah, but only for the kids. I'm digging through these pages and you're washing up the dishes and you're wondering if I'm one. Will it always be like this? Still Achilles rages on and on. And I had 1,000 ways to say I loved you. I lost them all somewhere on the road. And now I'm digging through the chapters of ancient epic verse. And still Achilles rages on and on.
That is an awfully nice thing to get in your email.
I think it's Spotify ready.
Yeah, good job, Charlie. Yeah, he does the Primer podcast. I did a show with him. I have no idea when it'll be out. Maybe it'll be out before this is. You can go listen to Charlie. He's a songwriter, and I'm going to get all choked up. I was wearing a Turnpike Troubadours hat, and he saw that in the Zoom call and said, well, you might like this song I wrote. And I do like it, so thanks for doing that. Maybe that's why we do this show, because it's damn sure not because of the growing numbers.
Well, we would appreciate any help you can give us on that. Just tell your friends or tell your enemies if you think, they need it too. Socrates says you're supposed to do good to your enemies. I'm just sitting here as you're playing that. I'm listening to that beautiful music and I'm looking at our Slack channel. Things are popping up. The community we have here at Online Great Books, I think if you're a certain kind of person, we're the people for you.
Well, you said that.
Well, our factotum, Josh Warsham, says, never know which way the side channels are going. Are we learning Latin, growing mushrooms, building a forge, or studying cybersecurity? Reading the canon will always be the mainest thing we do here, but it's fun to see what you guys do with the other 165 hours in a week. Apparently, there's a coding channel now. There is a chess channel, and Jason just posted the next chess tournament that the chess nerds are doing. And I mean nerd in a good way. There's a history channel. There's a shop talk channel where people are whittling spoons and building forges. And there's a strength channel for those of us that lift. There's a Tolkien channel for all of them. There's homesteading self-sufficiency. There's, what else we got? I mean, no, let me put it this way. Aristotle says that philosophy begins with wonder. And we have a whole bunch of people showing up at Online Great Books that experience the world with a sense of wonder. And so they want to learn everything. And maybe you don't have time, but there's probably a channel for you there.
We had a meetup at my place for all the people that are members of Online Great Books that are within a drive, and we did it on the coldest weekend in the last 60 years. And we did it out in my shop around the wood stove. 17 people showed up, plus a Fed. I don't know who the Fed was, but I assume that anytime I have an invitation to the, non-family and there's people show up, that one of them's a Fed. And everybody had a great time. My wife was surprised about how nice and good and fun everybody was. But we met all these people because of the books, and Achilles rages on and on.
Yeah, I love that song. So the next time I do the dishes, or my wife wants me to do the dishes, I'll say, but Achilles is raging on.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I got Homer to deal with. All right, so today we're going to do Leo Strauss. Leo Strauss was at University of Chicago, 1899 and 1973. I'd read one other of his books, The City and Man, I believe, and it was influential in my thinking. Apparently there's something called Straussianism. I have no idea what it is, but some people are enemies of Straussianism. If you can tell me what it is, maybe I'll decide if I'm one of them or not.
Well, see, Karl, you have to do a very careful read to find the esoteric truth, and if you had done that, you would in fact know what Straussianism is.
Yeah, well, if I do know what Straussianism is, I'm not going to tell you, dear listener, because that would be the esoteric truth that only the very attentive listener can hear.
Right. And
anyway, that's what we're going to talk about today, is this concept that he has that I first encountered in his reading of Plato's Republic. Ancient writers don't always tell you what they mean.
Or do they?
In other words, they do not always tell you what they mean, and there's lots of reasons for that. So Socratic irony is on purpose. It's not Socrates being a dick.
Well, it might be that. I think it's both and, Karl.
Why wouldn't he just tell me what he means?
I think it's both and.
Well, but that there's that you can't. I mean, and I thought this would be particularly appropriate. Not that we're going to mention the outside world of politics, but I'll just hint it at you. In certain social media platforms, mostly all of them, if you say certain things, you will get canceled, banned, shut down. Well, okay, let's say you live in a world like that where you cannot have actual freedom of speech. Okay? Just as a thought experiment, imagine that you live in a world where there isn't freedom of speech. Do you quit having freedom of thought? And furthermore, if you still have freedom of thought, do you then not have freedom to communicate that thought? Well, you might have freedom to communicate that thought, but you can't say it out loud.
Yeah. So you said let's start with on a forgotten kind of writing. Maybe we should start with persecution in the art of writing, because I think all this kind of hinges on his idea about persecution.
Well, sure.
Or we can go back and you drive, and I'll gripe. Yeah, he's got this idea of persecution that's not necessarily what you might think at first. So we know what the regular kind of persecution is, right? We don't like what you said, and we're going to hit you. But there's another kind where, like he says, that society is necessarily driven and ruled by opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those opinions may not be true, but society requires them to operate
Yeah, I would say that's another reason to do esoteric writing. So there's a couple of reasons to do it. I think we could probably make a list. Well, let me just read the second paragraph of Persecution in the Art of Writing. A large section of the people, probably the great majority of the younger generation, accepts the government-sponsored views as true, if not at once, at least after a time. How have they been convinced, and where does the time factor enter? They have not been convinced by compulsion, for compulsion does not produce conviction. It merely paves the way for conviction by silencing contradiction. What is called freedom of thought, in a large number of cases, amounts to, and even for all practical purposes consists of, the ability to choose between two or more different views presented by the small minority of people who are public speakers and writers. So there's certain opinions that are out there that are permitted, that you have your political freedom to pick from.
Right. So there's the mainline stuff, whatever. And then in the circles I hang around with, we talk about gatekeepers who publish the controlled opposition. So that even the opposing view is really not necessarily in direct opposition to the mainstream view. So, for example, a lot of people who mainstream media calls conservatives are in fact progressives and are also disgusting in my view. But by letting them publish and letting them be part of the conversation, the society ends up controlling the Overton window of what is acceptable to discuss, yes?
It makes it look like you're making intellectual choices when you're picking from the very small menu of acceptable thoughts that you can have. So you can have beef, and you can have the chicken, or you can have the veggie plate. But that's it.
No salmon?
No.
No veal?
Nope.
Pork?
No, God, no. So there's limits there. So let's say you are the salmon or veal. Okay? You don't have a place on the menu. Does that mean you cease having salmon and veal thoughts?
No, I cannot stop having pork thoughts.
So that if you are going to communicate those thoughts, you can't do them in the standard political menu because it just won't be heard. Or to use another metaphor, it's like the squelch on your ham radio has been turned all the way up. You can't get through. If you wish to communicate things, you're going to have to communicate them sideways.
Yeah.
You know, as a what if.
For many reasons. Like, you might not get published in the New York Times if you want to say something like in favor of the gold standard. Perhaps. I don't know. Like, that's not very controversial, but you're not going to get published.
I have a copy of a letter Walker Percy wrote to the New York Times about issues surrounding the beginning of life and the termination of such things. They didn't publish it.
No. And he's Walker Percy.
Because it wasn't the issue, there wasn't the view that they wanted to promote, so they didn't publish it.
So there's that sort of gatekeeping, but there's also the majority of people can actually only hear and accept and digest a certain set of ideas, and if you run if the ideas are presented to them are too contrary, they fall on deaf ears. You're just shouting into the void at some point. Both of those kinds of shuddering of speech are persecution, according to him. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Well, and it might actually be actual persecution. You have to remember that Socrates was made to drink poison.
Yep.
So all of you that are mad at him that he doesn't tell you what he thinks, if he told you what he thought, and I do think he thinks things, they would have poisoned him at 35 rather than at 70.
Yeah.
And you would never have heard of him. And whatever influence he had for good, I think for good, wouldn't have happened. So there are only certain things that you can say straight out.
Is that true?
But is it true that there are only certain things that you can say? Well, you can say them, but when you say them, everyone else will quit listening to you.
Right.
So you have the freedom to speak them, I suppose, if you stand out in a field and utter them to nobody. But that's not really freedom. I don't know. That's not freedom of speech that I would count. So that's one reason. There is a very real fear of persecution. Certainly in the ancient world there was. Socrates was killed. Aristotle left town so that he wouldn't be killed. Seneca was ordered to kill himself, and he did. There are many examples of this where wrong think got you killed. Mm-hmm. There are other examples of people that didn't get killed, like Plato. Or Virgil, I'll argue, a little bit later. Or Aeschylus, I think, who also writes esoterically. So you'll see people not saying exactly what they say. So they'll say something for everybody, but then they'll say something not quite for everybody, for the attentive reader to figure out. I want to give another reason for this kind of esoteric writing. This is also on page 23 of Persecution and the Art of Writing. Oh, it's in the other essay, about the importance of opinion. All right, let me flip to the other essay. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
This is great podcast, right? When we're flipping pages. If you go to the beginning of On a Forgotten Kind of Writing. So, second paragraph. I should begin by briefly summarizing my suggestion. In studying certain early thinkers, I became aware of this way of conceiving the relationship between the quest for truth, philosophy or science, and society. Philosophy or science, the highest activity of man, is the attempt to replace opinion about all things by knowledge of all things. But opinion is the element of society. Philosophy or science is, therefore, the attempt to dissolve the element in which society breathes, and thus it endangers society. Okay, pause right there. So, society runs on opinions, generally accepted, not well-grounded opinions about the way things are. Philosophy will attempt to dive beneath those and maybe find the reasons for the opinions, and you might even find that the reasons are kind of thin. Okay, I'll give you our example of McIntyre's talk on natural rights. There aren't any such thing. When you examine them, when you scratch real deep, natural rights is a concept that doesn't hold together. Not unless you assume a whole bunch of other things. So, what do? If you are a bomb-throwing philosopher, you say, to hell with it, and you blow up everybody's opinions.
But are those people actually heard?
I don't know. Cynicism is pretty easy sell. I could convince you that everything's fake. That's not hard to do.
Especially when everything's fake.
Well, but if you convince people that everything's fake, what do you have left? You know, I think there's a danger here. I mean, he's got his answer later in the paragraph, but there is a danger. So let's say you were a non-careful reader of my friend Friedrich. Okay? You know, your high school kid discovers Nietzsche and reads it and says, ooh, I can do a genealogy of all morals and make them all fall apart. Hooray. And then you actually do it. Mm-hmm. Okay, you walk around your high school and everybody who's good and noble, you undermine them and you show that they really have ulterior motives and that it's all power and everything else, and you've completely destroyed your high school and it ends in a fire or something. Just because you can poke at the foundations of your society, maybe even truthfully, does it mean you should?
Right. I learned a lot from this thing. It's not good for society. It's probably not good for you. The bomb-throwing philosopher might say, well, society's fake, and I need to, subvert the norms and, in order for change to come about and for us to bring about, true philosophy, maybe. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I kind of have a Hobbesian, not a Hobbesian view, excuse me, little Burkean there. Like, it's not for me to really decide what gets torn asunder and replaced. One of the things I get from this is more just about style. Like, how many people can actually read it? The esoteric truth. You put it out there, and how many people can actually take it in, absorb it, appreciate it, incorporate it into their worldview, and then add to it? Not very many.
Not very many.
So how many people, if you're lucky enough to have an esoteric truth to write, how many people could actually read it? How many people could actually see it, take it in, appreciate it?
Well, more in the past than now.
Yeah.
So he writes somewhere, I'm not going to have all the quotes at hand, but in the Enlightenment, this is in the essay on Lessing, in the Enlightenment, the idea was that we're just going to shine light on everything, and there's no reason to conceal anything. Mm-hmm. And so you have somebody like Kant, who I don't think is esoteric.
He wrote a lot of lines to put stuff between.
That's true. But he'll come out and say that he does not think that any of the arguments for a first principle work at all. Okay, well, 300 years ago, he would have hid that. He doesn't feel any fear.
Mm-hmm.
Heck, 30 years before that, he would have hid that because David Hume does. David Hume, who's likely of the same opinion, does not tell you that. He puts it in the dialogue on natural religion. And you have to figure out for yourself what you think David Hume thinks.
I'm reading Francis Bacon right now. Oh, God. I don't think there's very much esoteric about that gentleman. He puts it all out there.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't buy Aristotle's prime mover argument, for example.
So what happens if you put that out there? I should say, I don't agree with Kant on this point. I don't agree with Hume on this point. But they're just not being esoteric. Kierkegaard is esoteric, but that's another story. Like my high school example, your high school had its little community, and then the smart-ass kid comes in and destroys it all. What do you have left? And maybe, yeah, there were stupid rules. Yeah, maybe that the quarterback dates the head cheerleader was a stupid rule or whatever, but it was a rule. And it was order. And so I'm just going to continue reading this quote. Hence, philosophy or science must remain the preserve of a small minority, and philosophers or scientists must respect, this is Strauss talking, must respect the opinions on which society rests. To respect opinions is something entirely different from accepting them as true. So, philosophers or scientists who hold this view about the relationship of philosophy or science and society are driven to employ a peculiar manner of writing, which would enable them to reveal what they regard as the truth to the few, without endangering the unqualified commitment of the many to the opinions on which society rests. They would distinguish between the true teaching as the esoteric teaching and the socially useful teaching as the exoteric teaching. Whereas the exoteric teaching is meant to be easily accessible to every reader, the esoteric teaching discloses itself only to the careful study and well-trained readers after long and concentrated study. I think I mangled that last quote, but you get the point. I like the notion of respecting the order. Heck, Montaigne does that. Montaigne's essays, he'll give you every 3,000 ways to think of a thing, and then in the end he'll say you should go according to custom.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why? But nevertheless, he's Montaigne, he's an insightful person, he's got his thoughts, and he's going to try to communicate them to you, but you might miss them.
Yeah, one of the problems I have with this is if we say that great authors have these hidden messages and their views are not writ large, then it can give to the reader to read things that aren't there.
Sure.
So should this be an esoteric teaching? Should he have not said this out loud?
Yeah, we probably should have all said this in code. Nothing that we say is true. We're just pretending. Okay, so there's two things. One is whether or not I think that esoteric writing is a good thing to do. And the other is whether it's actually happened. And therefore, it's something that you might want to know as you're going to read some of these books. Okay? Whether I share Strauss's opinions on opinion and philosophy is kind of beside the point. To some degree I do, to some degree I don't. But the fact is that writers have written this way. I would argue they have written this way. And that if you want to read classical writing and you don't realize that there might be multiple levels of meaning there, then you're going to miss the point. Just a brief example. How many people think the Republic is about city government?
Everybody.
Yeah, that's the obvious meaning. Even though there's some clues that it's not. But, people aren't particularly attentive, and they're going to get the big patch of meaning.
By the way, It is, in fact, also about that. That's the slippery thing, right?
But it's not the mainest thing, in my opinion.
Right. Are you allowed to say what it is about, Karl?
No, that's a hidden meaning.
Okay. I thought so. I won't say it in either. Something that irritates me, I don't lead a lot of seminars, but when I lead a seminar, I get to find out what people think about those texts, because I don't really know what people think about them. I just read them myself, and I find that people make a lot of proclamations about Platonism and what Plato thought. I don't think we know very much about that.
You're never so sure.
Yeah, I don't think we know much about it. The things that I know, that I think I know about him, more of that came from some of those letters, which are, we're not real sure about, like the seventh letter.
Mm-hmm.
But we just don't know very much about what Plato or Socrates thought.
Yeah. Well, let me bring up the seventh letter, which is another reason for perhaps writing esoterically, is that philosophy, if it happens anywhere, it happens in the mind. And it happens in your mind, dear listener, not mine, when I'm talking to you about a book. If I tell you what to think, if I give you bullet points, you won't actually think. You might memorize. You might be inspired. You might be emotionally invested, but you're not actually thinking. The thinking happens when you come to the conclusion. So if you write too obviously about the deeper things, the more important things, I don't know that you can write obviously about them.
Yeah. Aided discovery.
I mean, if you don't discover it, you're not gonna.
No.
I can't make you discover it.
In the orientations for online Greek books, I always tell people, and when I do how to read a book seminars, I don't know if I got this from Adler, if it's in that book, or if it's my paraphrase, but I say that people can't be taught; they only learn.
Yeah.
Just stating the things overtly makes it more difficult to make the discovery. It's too on the nose. But if you have to go parse it out and find it for yourself, that's something you're going to learn a whole lot more better. And he says here, the very first paragraph, maybe it's the second one, of Persecution and the Art of Writing, by paraphrase here in the margin says, independent thought will or can arrive at different and new conclusions. He kind of pokes positivists in the eye right here at the beginning of this. Yeah, he says that if you just state everything overtly, getting new and original thoughts and new conclusions is going to be a lot harder to find. That's another good reason to hide it.
Well, and what you find is, speaking of positivism, you're going to find that your truths aren't any more well supported than the opinions that you've just gotten rid of. And this is probably me, not Strauss, but Medea, the lady in the play who kills her kids, is every bit as rational as Jason is.
What's positive?
Every bit as rational. You legislate. You decide what's going to be right, and it is. You just posit that this is the way it is. But it's not any more well supported.
In positivism, truth iterates?
Well, I don't know that it does.
Well, well, I don't think so. But I think that's one of the ideas behind it. We posit these truths, and then we correct, and then we build on that, and we posit a new one, and it iterates towards the truth. So how about this?
Yeah.
Stupid science. The rate of... I'm just going to make some declarations here, and some people get mad. The rate of innovation seems to have slowed. It's not like it was in the 50s and 60s. If somebody says, oh, I've just developed a new app for a phone, and I'm a tech company, I don't care. I don't see that as technology. That's more of the same. We've been having apps since you could put a cassette tape in your TRS-80. It's just maybe a little shinier and easier to deliver. Real innovation seems to have slowed down. The iPhone isn't really that innovative either. We had GPSs, phones, radios, cameras, microprocessors, and a whole lot of other things before they had the iPhone, but maybe nobody had ever put them together in such an elegant package. But it's not the kind of innovation that you would have seen in the 30s, 40s, 50s, or certainly not the 1840s, 50s, 60s. And specialization seems to have stifled that innovation. I think that people who have eclectic educations and have areas of interest across disciplines tend to come up with these weird new insights and new concepts that the specialist can't see. That's really positivism. The specialists are the ones that we've relegated all of our innovation to, and they can't innovate because they have one set of tools that was either was responsible for the technology we have or derived from the technology we have, and they can't iterate. the number of thoughts that they're allowed to have is very constrained, and they don't even know it. And the number of tools they have to deal with the problems in front of them are also very constrained, and they don't even know it. Or sometimes they do. Sometimes they do.
Well, and then there's what I think is the biggest mistake, is this thought that science, that rationality can come up with values.
Oh, jeez.
Which it can't, which is the reason I would say Strauss is right. You have to respect the opinions.
Right.
They
Right.
give everybody the reason to live the way they live. Because you can't replace them.
I'm reading Bacon right now, and he's writing about the scientific method, you know, it's in his Novum Organum, however you pronounce it. He sees a lot of problems with deduction that are right. You know, one of the problems about the syllogism is that our language doesn't exactly map onto reality sometimes. So, you know, he has a big problem with that, and he talks about it, and he describes that problem in full. It's great. And he doesn't like the way the scholastics and the way Aristotle treated experience and experiment. He didn't like that. So I'm reading this, I'm thinking, man, that's a keen observation. But he has no way to deal with problems of virtue, or he rejects all the tools that we had used to learn something about that before, and wants to do everything by demonstration from then on, he says.
Yeah, so Strauss talks about this, page 65 of...
Poor Karl. Like, I want to talk about Bacon. I want to talk about Elon Musk. You got this.
Yeah, I want to talk about Aeschylus. But let me talk about Strauss first.
Okay.
So he's talking about social scientists that, so this is on page 65. Social scientists, contemporary ones, teach that every society rests in the last analysis on specific values or specific myths. That is, on assumptions which are not evidently superior or preferable to any alternative assumptions. Okay? They imply, therefore, that social science reveals and stresses the arbitrary character of the basic assumptions underlying any given society, but social science desires to be objective and undogmatic. All right, so that's the approach. So if you have cannibals in New Guinea, I think that's where cannibals used to be, or vegetarians somewhere else, you can't come up with a reason why one is better than the other.
That's what Montaigne says.
Yeah, but then Montaigne would say, don't eat people.
Right.
She probably pushed him.
Right.
Because French don't eat people. So Strauss goes on. They fail to see, however, that this state of things creates a tension between the requirements of social science, knowledge of the truth and teachings of the truth, and the requirements of society, wholehearted acceptance of the principles of society. If I know that the principles of liberal democracy are not intrinsically superior to the principles of communism or fascism, I am incapable of wholehearted commitment to liberal democracy. He's writing, I suppose, in the 50s.
Is that one of his little esoteric lines?
Do you think he means it? Is his commitment to liberal democracy?
Or does he know that it's not materially superior to communism or fascism?
I don't know. That's a discussion point for the seminar. But so you do this reductive, scientific, in scare quotes, analysis of everything in your society, and then you blow it up. You blow it up, and then you end up, a society, a people needs to believe something. It doesn't necessarily have to be true.
Yeah.
I wish it were. I want it to be true. But they need to believe something.
He points to Aristotle's talk about the noble lie. What is that? Is that book 6 of the Republic?
Well, it's Plato talks about it, and
Yeah.
I think it's in 3.
Book 3, yeah.
Plato talks about it first.
He says that they're necessary, and I mean, he's probably right. In 2021 America, no, wait a minute. In the United States in 2021, there are a number of these opinions or these noble lies or whatever are becoming pretty worn, and they don't seem to really work any longer. So I'll talk about my dad. Dad says, oh my gosh, we're going to elect these people, and they're going to turn this into a socialist country. So the noble lie behind that is that it's not a socialist country. Meanwhile, my dad has single-payer health care provided by the state, gets universal basic income provided by the state, drives on these roads and this water and all of this other stuff provided by the state, gets discounted property tax, doesn't pay as much in property tax through the state because of his age. Like if you're very poor or if you're over a certain age in the United States, it is absolutely, positively, completely socialist. This country is. Mm-hmm. It's just if you're in the middle that it's not. So Dad's like, oh, they're going to turn this into a socialist country. I'm like, wait a minute, they did that in 1938. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Now, I think that maybe the libertarian type or the fiscal conservative could have benefited from that sort of a noble lie in, like, let's say 1986, right? Fight socialism, whatever. Maybe 66, maybe 56. But look, we're there now. What does holding on to that fiction do? Is it holding the country together, or do we have two camps of people in this country that see everything as entirely different? And now they're irreconcilable, and they're going to kill each other if we're not careful.
Well, so that would be the downside of this. You have the collapse of the, whether it's socialism or not, you have the collapse of the generally accepted story about the country. You don't have a people anymore. Okay? So you don't have a shared experience of a view of the world anymore. You have two or more, and then bad things happen. But the sort of destructive bomb-throwing philosophers have torn everything down. Philosophers, movie makers, opinion makers. Mm-hmm. Every movie you see is cynical now. Every family you see on a movie screen is dysfunctional. You tear it down, you don't have anything to put in its place. Okay, so go back to Nietzsche's thing on the death of God. Nietzsche, who is so good on all of this stuff, even if you don't like his conclusions, which I don't. God is dead, you killed him. Who will atone for this deed? Now that the oceans have been drunk dry, And what he means by that, I think, is you've gotten rid of the foundations of your society, which in 1870, 1880, when he wrote it, were largely Christian. More so than we are now.
See, that's a little exoteric barb in there. Like, the public thinks that Nietzsche is saying that God is dead, we're on our own, religion is dead, and it's a good thing. Like, most people if you did that Jay Leno thing where you ask the person in the street what that means, they don't understand Nietzsche saying, look at what you've done, dum-dum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a good thing.
No. Yeah, so the public, Joe Blow, gets one thing out of that reading, and then the more careful reading gets something different from it. What do we do when the noble lie doesn't fit anymore, Karl? What do we do when it doesn't serve society anymore? How do you change to the new narrative, the new opinion, the new cultural narrative that lets us not kill each other?
I don't know. I've quoted Heidegger on this before, and he says only a God can save us. He means something kind of like what Nietzsche said.
Yeah.
But you don't know who it's going to be. Honestly, this is some of the attraction of fascism.
And communism.
So Mussolini comes along, at least he's giving a meaning and an order to the Italian people.
Right.
Who might think there isn't one. Because the old noble lies are gone, and so you have to come up with a new one.
Karl, shoot, he just said that fascism is attractive. Gotta get that. Come. Where does he work?
No, you don't know what I said, because I'm speaking esoterically.
You are crafty.
You don't know what I mean about that. All that stuff was in ironic scare quotes.
So, dear old Dad, like, home mortgages are underwritten by the federal government. So tax money goes to making sure that people pay low interest on, like, it's socialist, Dad. He's like, yeah, that's true, yeah. And then I'll talk to him a week later, and he's like, they're gonna make this a socialist country. I'm like, Dad, it is a socialist country. Now what? Like, in that moment, he'll accept it, and he's not dumb. He's just 75. He's got that wrinkle in his brain, and we can't change the shape of that wrinkle.
Well, and at some point you say, I don't know if he listens to the show, but at some point you say, well, what are you going to gain from that? do you need to win this? So this is a mistake that you make if you're too much on the exoteric. I'm going to convince people, darn it.
Right.
Well, no, you're probably not. Okay? Most people can't be convinced. Lots of people can't be convinced.
Yeah. Is me saying that this is a socialist country esoteric? Is that an esoteric truth, Karl?
Well, I'm saying you're trying to convince him probably in the wrong way. You're coming at it straight on, okay? And he might agree with you in a moment. You might want to do it like in a questioning way. Well, what's socialism?
Right.
Then talk about that and allow him to come to the conclusion, which you've never said.
Right.
I mean, just think, we just had a political season. Did you, dear listener, convince anybody?
What I should probably do is just talk about how we're going to fix the brush hog. That's what I should.
That would be great.
That's probably what.
That would be great. Yeah. So I want to give some examples of esoteric, exoteric. So whether it's good or not to do it, that's, you guys can think about that for yourselves. I wouldn't want to tell you how to think. But in fact, that it does happen. So here's an occasion where it was not done correctly, and I think it was a bad example. So I'm going to give a church example. Heard a sermon in Missouri. It was a couple of years ago, and the priest, believe it or not, started talking about, all right, I have to say this for our friend Thomas. I think the priest was wrong. I don't think he's right in what he said. But even if he was right, he was not strategic. Okay? So he said, typical modern priest theology, that things that the Bible said happened didn't happen. Okay? I think he's wrong on that. Nevertheless, he said it in a sermon to a bunch of people in small town Missouri, taking direct aim at their opinions that order their lives, their churchy lives, is that the Bible's true, that I should do what it says, and I should order my life thus. Not a terrible way to live. But he chipped it apart, casually, in a sermon. Even if he was right, which I think his theology is bad, but that's another story. But even if he was right, he shouldn't ought to have said it.
And what right does he have to say that?
Because what good does it do to Sally Mae in the pew to have her priest say that, I forget exactly what it was, that Adam and Eve weren't real or whatever it was that he said.
But Karl, the truth is paramount. The truth must be out.
Well, I don't know. You're trying to win an argument? People are more than arguments.
Yeah. See,
this is a hard truth for me to learn. I had to learn that.
Yeah,
Took me a while.
I haven't learned it yet. Keep saying it. Say it a different way, maybe. See, I'm gonna do some Bacon some more. He wants to reduce everything to what he calls a demonstration, an experiment. And it's just not.
Mm-hmm.
Not everything's an experiment.
It's
not everything's reducible to control groups and arguments and invective.
And as Percy says, following Kierkegaard, you can know everything in the world. You can have it all wrapped up in a tidy rationalist bundle and still not know what to do at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
Well, your opinions are well-received opinions from your family, from your people, they're going to tell you what to do at 3 o'clock. Well, it's tea time.
Right.
Or it's nap time. Or it's to go, I don't know, do you milk cows at 3? Whatever you do on a farm at 3. We can see this in MacIntyre. Your virtues grow out of the community that you live in. The community is a shared core of, what does he call it? Values? I'm blanking out on his language, but
teleology is derived from your role in the community, and then from that.
Yeah, and the community is not necessarily something that you can prove, but you could tear it down if you're a smart aleck philosopher. And then you've left a whole bunch of people with no telos, with no end to no goal to their life. Well, good job. Are you right. Proud of yourself? What have you gained? So that priest, he ought not to have done it, even if he were right, which I don't think he was, but he shouldn't have done it. And he shouldn't do it and keep taking his paycheck, put it that way.
But what about the truth then, Karl?
Well, what is truth? The conformity of that which is in the mind to that which is in reality. Okay. All right.
That's where I was going.
That works in the case of the tree outside my window. That if I make a statement about the tree, if the statement in my mind somehow matches the truth about the tree, we could say that that is a true statement. What is truth in morality? Fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. Is that true?
What's kill?
Well, murder. Let's just take murder. Kill the innocent. Okay. So is it true that one ought not to do that?
Yeah.
Where in reality can I point to it and have... So if truth is the conformity of the mind to reality, where is the reality that you're pointing to when you make a moral statement? It's not as obvious as it is in science.
Right.
So maybe the opinions ain't even wrong.
Right. Right.
They're just not accessible to positivism. They're not accessible to the scientific method. And if you think the only things that are true are the things in the scientific method, you're just going to blow a hole through all sorts of what you call opinions that just don't fit your method. So be careful. We can do other examples of esoteric writing. I'm just pulling these. I think Homer does it.
Yeah.
Homer never tells you what he thinks. He shows you things. And you have to think things. And I think, for example, I don't think you're supposed to be like Achilles. I don't know for sure because he doesn't tell me for sure.
Right.
But I don't think the heroic ideal is... If I had to guess, I don't think it's Homer's ideal. I think Achilles, they're showing you the conflicts within it. In the end, when he's tossing and turning because his friend is dead and he probably killed him, in effect, and killing Hector didn't do him any good. You know, he got everything he wanted. He's the hero of heroes. He gets everything he prays for, and he still hates it. I think that's a comment.
Yeah, for sure. Does Homer have a hero in there?
Priam?
Yeah, I don't know if he's a hero, but I think Priam and Nestor are good men.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not clear who among the others are.
And think of what a lousy book would be if he just came right out and said, here's your good guy.
Yeah.
And we chew over this. We're chewing over Agamemnon and Achilles and Diomedes and Odysseus and what they do and why they do it. And Homer leaves the room for us to figure it out. And he's shown us certain things. So he's picked certain things to show us. Probably because he thinks certain things, but he's not telling it to us.
At the meetup we had here last weekend, there are a couple of people who are in the same seminar. And I heard them talking about the Iliad. I kind of sidled up there to hear what they were saying. And they have an Agamemnon fan in their seminar.
Is it me?
No, it's not you. Well, but that is how you are, though. Like, if nobody will stand up for Agamemnon in seminar, you will do that because you're a liar.
Yep.
A liar. No, it was, I'll tell you who it was later, but yeah, Agamemnon's disgusting. So there.
But Homer never says he's disgusting.
No, he doesn't.
You have to figure it out for your own. So I think that's esoteric. I was just thinking about the Eurystheia, Aeschylus, and Prometheus Bound, that little quartet there. Are they really about Zeus and Prometheus? You know, when he says, when Might, that's one of the characters' names, when he says, only Zeus is free. Was that about Zeus? You know, your average audience can say, I guess that's right, only the chief of the gods is free.
No.
And your unaverage audience is going to say, only the tyrant is free.
Right. Is there much of this style of writing in Shakespeare?
Oh, gosh. Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's hard as hell to figure out what Shakespeare means.
You know, people hate me for this. I don't think there's as much there as everybody lets on with that guy. I really
Yeah, I know you're not a fan.
I'll take the Greeks over that guy every time.
I think the sonnets are better, but the sonnets are definitely esoteric. You know, who's it written to? You know?
Yeah.
You don't even know.
Yeah, so I'm reading Bacon right now, who was contemporary with Shakespeare. His prose is just crisp, clear. Yeah, I mean, he's to the point. Of course, it's sort of technical writing or philosophical writing. It's not the same thing as Macbeth, and he doesn't make any overtures at, you know, any kind of meter or anything like that. But yeah, the Shakespeare stuff, I can't get ready for it, man. I've been trying for 46 years. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not going to fight you on that. Although I love him. Go to the end of Oresteia. So you like Aeschylus. So the end of the Oresteia. So the Furies. Okay, the Furies represent the old gods. Blood feuds. You know, Orestes is in trouble because he killed his mother, and that's a crime against blood. And so they're torturing him. And they go to Athens, and they have this court case where I think Apollo gets a vote, and they make everything better. Now, here's what you do. So you read that, and you say, well, Aeschylus, this is unconvincing. Harumph. You made a mistake, Aeschylus. Well, okay, so if you have this hidden key, this key that sometimes they're not saying what they mean, okay? You look at it and you say, Aeschylus presents this contrived court case at the end to give an easy solution to the problem of the clan justice of the old gods and the logical justice of the new gods. Maybe he did it on purpose. Okay? And then you start to think, why did he do it? Maybe there's not an easy resolution between these two. Maybe they're going to fight forever.
Right.
Maybe you're supposed to be sympathetic to the Furies. I sure am. It opens some keys for thought for you. I think the author probably intended it that way. It's too easy for us to look back at these authors and say, well, they screwed up. They screwed up. Assume that they didn't screw up, and then try to figure out why they would do it. I'll give you another example.
Yeah, and by the way, we're talking about Aeschylus, not Dean Koontz.
I like Dean Koontz.
Well, you know what I'm saying. Like, if you're reading an op-ed...
But he writes 4 novels a year. He might make a mistake.
Right, or just, you know, my blog, for example, I probably messed up. You know, but if you read Aeschylus or you read Sophocles, you're reading Oedipus, it might be you, not him.
It might be you. Like in Oedipus, when does Jocasta know? Did she always know? You know, there's some hidden things in here.
Was he playing crazy or was he really crazy?
Yeah, or in the Odyssey, when Odysseus tells the story of his adventures. Is he telling the truth?
At the beat-up, one of the guys was talking about Odysseus just wanted to get home. I was like, did he really? Did he really want to get home? Like, he wanted to get home-ish. Right?
I'll give you another example just to show. This is for the readers. These things are all over the place. So there is this great poem in the Latin language called the Aeneid. And in, I believe, book 6 of the Aeneid, Aeneas goes down to the underworld. And it's a much happier occasion than when Odysseus goes down to the underworld. And he sees there's this parade of all of these bits of Roman glory to come in the future. Wonderful poetry. It's everything Augustus hired him to write the poem for. And you get to the end, and there are 2 gates out of the underworld. One of horn, one of ivory. I forget which one is which, but one of them is where true dreams come from, and one of them is where false dreams come from. Guess which way Aeneas leaves the underworld? Through the gate of false dreams. Why, Mr. Virgil, that's pretty interesting. Why do you have this glorious song of future Rome, this wonderful bit of propaganda, and then have it go through the gate of false dreams? Is that a clue?
Oh, Zeus punished Prometheus for giving man the gift of fire. Oh, no. It's vain hope. That's why he's in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
You take hope pour a little technology in there with there and stir, you got bad times.
Watch out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, go back to the priest example. Parables are esoteric. Jesus obviously does this. There's a few times when he explains them. He'll say something like, I said it this way so that those who have ears may hear. Well, those who have ears are the ones that are the audience for the esoteric teaching of the parables, whereas everyone else, that was the parable about sowing seed.
Right.
You know, the sower throws seed on the hard ground or on the good ground or in the thistles or whatever. Oh, that's a nice story about agriculture.
It's a parable about exoteric and esoteric writing.
It is, actually.
Yeah.
So this style of writing is biblical. If you can tell me, dear reader, what in the heck Revelation is about, that book's clearly written in code. So is Daniel, for that matter. The book of Daniel. So it is absolutely a fact of ancient writing. And so knowing that it is a fact of ancient writing gives you some clues on how to read that stuff. When you do Plato studies, it bugs me a lot, because I guess I've been too influenced by Strauss, that people will attempt to take the Platonic dialogues and put them in order.
Oh, right.
And they'll say, well, there's early Plato, there's middle Plato, and then there's late Plato. So like the Euthyphro would be early Plato, Republic would be middle, and the Laws would be late. And the way you characterize it is the importance of the theory of forms in the dialogues. And here's the theory. 19th century German philosophers decided that Plato must have meant something. And then they arrange all the contradictions in Plato's dialogues, because there are, as if that shows you the development of the thought. So they're assuming what they should be trying to figure out. They're assuming what Plato means to get the meaning of Plato.
Is Plato a Plato?
Rather than figuring Plato's a literary genius who wrote what he wanted to write, and if there's contradictions, they're in there on purpose. And the clue that might give you, let's say there's theory of forms is this idea that the real reality is not accessible to you through the senses, but through the mind contemplating on the form of the good, and the forms are kind of the exemplars of things that exist. That's the theory of forms. Aristotle makes fun of it, probably rightly.
Yeah.
But, Plato makes fun of it.
Right. You see a
And so
Platonist.
if you see the contradictions in his presentation of the theory of forms, and you don't just explain them away because you're a smarty-pants German philosopher, you might get the clue that maybe Plato didn't mean you to take them that seriously.
Makes sense to me.
Walker Percy said somewhere novelists need to be liars.
Seminar host, too, apparently.
Am I poking at your dreams and your hopes?
No. Reading is really difficult. Hot take. Parsing out what these people meant is not as clear-cut as you'd think. And, the postmodernists pointing out troubles with language, ain't necessarily wrong, but it doesn't mean it's as dangerous as some folks let on, these words that we use. But I see people miss the boat all the time, and I know I do too, by the way. I'm no perfect reader, and I don't know all the answers, but I'm reading Bacon, and he talks about Aristotle imposing categories on objects. He's not doing that at all. He's like, here's a way of thinking about things so that we can all say the same word at the same time. Here are these categories. This is a heuristic. And this is a way we can think about things and how we can help define stuff so that we can actually talk about the same thing at the same time. And then we can maybe come up with an accurate syllogism if we know that what men are and what mortals are, who Socrates is. We could put a syllogism together. And one of the ways that we might agree on what we think a Socrates is put all the, figure out where he fits in all the categories. It's a heuristic. There's no way Aristotle was chopping everything up into 10 pieces and putting in these category buckets. Bacon thought that he was trying to impose a categorical structure on the entire universe.
So it's an act of the will rather than of the mind?
Well, that's what he says. I think that's the word he uses. He's trying to impose category on the It's like in the first 4 or 5 pages of Novum Organum. That's not what Aristotle was trying to do, I don't think. Here's a mental model that we can use that would be very, very helpful for us. So, yeah, reading's tough. Bacon's no dum-dum. I'm going to have to do a little more research. Like, he tosses out the prime mover argument that's in physics and in Aquinas. He's going to have to say something more about that for me. Yeah, this reading stuff's tough.
It is.
And if reading's tough, then writing's harder then.
It is. But PowerPoints are worse.
Oh, God.
Okay, so I once, for a job interview, had to prove that I could do PowerPoint. And I did it on Play-Doh. It's the worst thing I've ever done in my life. I did a Play-Doh PowerPoint. I still feel dirty about it. I'm going to give you bullet points of things that you will then parrot back to me. It's so clear. I can see exactly what I need to know. The fact is, you're not going to know anything from the PowerPoint presentation. Certainly not in philosophy or morality. You're not going to know anything from PowerPoint. You're only going to know it when you think through it. When you figure out your own understanding of what it means to be a human being in a world with other human beings. That's why people write this way. I mentioned Walker Percy. He says you write this way because even if you do have something to say, and he had plenty to say, if you say it too obviously, people won't listen. This is, in my opinion, the problem with just about every movie nowadays. They don't intend to entertain you. They intend to correct you. And I don't want to have any part of it. They need to be sneakier than that.
Karl Schute doesn't think he needs to be corrected in anything.
Well, if you're going to correct me, you're going to have to make me like it.
Right.
Getting preached at outside of its proper place in church is not a pleasant experience. So you come at things sideways, and whether you think this is a good method or not, it's been done, is what I'm saying. And you ought to know that it's been done and be aware of it in the things that you read. Heck, it's done now. We read the Marcuse thing. What was that line that he said? You may have to use non-democratic means against, I forget, the enemies, whatever his enemies were.
Moderates.
He doesn't say round them up and shoot them, but that's what he means.
Or some such. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yep.
So he can't say what he means because it's too extreme. At least at the time that he wrote that probably would have not gone over really well. But everybody who he's talking to knows what he means.
Yeah.
The college kid that reads it might not. Oh, non-democratic means. What does that mean?
Oh, well, the opposite of democracy, communist means. Like, who knows what they're thinking? I don't know. But he didn't come out and say, you might have to shoot some motherfuckers.
Yeah. There still is this sort of thing going on. It's good to be aware of it. Whether you practice it or think it's a good thing to practice, that's another question, but people do it. I do it a bit in my talk and seminars, although probably for different reasons. I don't really have a particular thing I want to communicate in a seminar. Having 2 hours on Seneca tonight, which is what I've got to do. You can't be exhaustive on Seneca. I don't know where it's going to go. Where I might obfuscate and, well, the technical word is lie, is if the conversation is lagging or if they're not considering a certain point that I think they ought to consider, I may say that I really believe it. I might pretend to think things.
Yeah, well, the goal of seminar is proper, which is the doing, So if you have to say things or take stances to make people do seminar, to make them question and answer properly, then that's okay. I still don't know what to do necessarily about ideas in the public. The ability to choose between two or more different views presented by the small minority of people who are public speakers or writers. I'm just jumping in the middle of a sentence here, page 23 in Strauss. Well, let me back up. What is called freedom of thought in a large number of cases amounts to, and even for all practical purposes consists of, the ability to choose between two or more different views presented by a small minority of people who are public speakers or writers. If this choice is prevented, the only kind of intellectual independence of which many people are capable is destroyed, and that is the only freedom of thought which is of political importance. Persecution is therefore the indispensable condition for the highest efficiency of what may be called logica equina, according to the horse-drawn Parmenides, or to Gulliver's something. One cannot say, or one cannot reasonably say, the thing which is not. That is, lies are inconceivable. Then he goes on to say, this would admit, as a matter of course, that man can lie and does lie, but they would add that lies are short-lived and cannot stand the test of repetition. This is the general view. Lies cannot stand the test of repetition, let alone of constant repetition, and that therefore a statement which is constantly repeated and never contradicted must be true. Another line of argument maintains that a statement made by an ordinary fellow may be a lie, but the truth of a statement made by a responsible and respected man, and therefore particularly by a man in a highly responsible or exalted position, is morally certain. These two enthymemes lead to the conclusion that the truth of a statement, which is constantly repeated by the head of the government and never contradicted, is absolutely certain. What do we do, Karl? I mean, this is Bill Gates he's talking about. Bill Gates has had a position of great responsibility and of great esteem. So now people turn to Bill Gates to tell them the truth about viruses, protein sources, agriculture.
Well, I've run Windows for years. I know plenty about viruses.
You know, right. Smarty pants. It's astounding to me that people look to him to say anything about anything other than his own life, or what the world of software was like up until he retired. What's going on?
So, what can you do? It is not probably susceptible to frontal attack. Okay?
Right.
Page 66 of the other essay. These dangers to intellectual freedom, the contemporary dangers to intellectual freedom, are caused not only by men like Senator McCarthy, but by the absurd dogmatism of certain academic liberals or scientific social scientists as well. Okay? So there's dogmatism all over the place. This would be a reason why I think now might be, in fact, the time for esoteric writing to make a comeback. It's not a happy occasion. I see it in the dark corners of the internet where I go to. I see it. Mm-hmm. People talk sideways and don't come straight at things, because to come straight at things, they lose their platform. It's very real danger. They might not kill you these days, but they'll cancel you, which, if you can't speak, are you even alive? So if you want to say that, you might have to say things in the subjunctive, with question marks, or do it through art, or do it with memes, or you need plausible deniability if your opinions are not the same as the ruling powers. I'm not saying mine are. Mine, as far as you know, dear listener, are perfectly identical with the ruling powers.
Clearly.
Yeah. How could they not be? They're the ruling powers. But you might end up having to write like Aeschylus, or write like Homer, or write like Virgil, or like John in the Apocalypse. You might have to do that if you wish to communicate thoughts, and you won't. It's been done before. He says in this essay on page 71 some things that this is on a forgotten kind of writing. In the middle of page 71, reading old books today is today indispensable as an antidote to the ruling dogma that the very notion of a final or true account of the whole is absurd. So old books have a place that might help you as an antidote to the ruling dogma. We'll go a little further down. The historian must proceed on the supposition that the great thinkers understood better than what they thought than the historian, who is not likely to be a great thinker. Okay, so go to the source. Read your Aristotle. The historian who writes about Aristotle is probably not as smart as Aristotle. It's almost certainly true. On the next page, at the bottom of the page, a man who happens to be a positivist can become a historian of philosophy only to the extent to which he develops the capacity of questioning positivism. You've got to be able to think around the corners. The problem with that is that in our current situation, frontal attacks probably aren't the way to go. Well, I don't know. It's a way to go.
It is a way to go.
But it's a way to go. You're going to go. Might be better to come at it sideways. He has this poem at the end of this ode on a Grecian urn, in the second stanza, the first line of it. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. that's a suggestive thought. You just say, well, what do you think? You know?
I'm very negative right now, Karl.
I hadn't noticed.
So I think what you've been saying here for this last 41 seconds is true. That maybe head on isn't the right way. But the mainest thing I got from this is that most people can't hear it anyway.
Yeah.
So hide it, put it in a little corner, and the people that look in corners will see it sometime. Don't just stand flat-footed and tell everybody whatever, because it doesn't matter, because they're not going to get it. Hide it in the corners, and the people that look in corners will see it.
Mm-hmm. It's not a nice answer, I know.
Otherwise, you're spinning your wheels. And so Karl says, oh, look, this is a useful tool for today. Or maybe that's what you were saying. I don't know. I have to read between the lines. And I think that's true, but that's the piece that I see more. It's just truth-telling is a revolutionary act in any situation, actually, because these societies are built around these noble lies and these agreed-upon narratives and stories and so on, and they're never congruent with reality. George Washington did not chop down the cherry tree. Abraham Lincoln didn't have a halo. But we need to believe all that kind of stuff so that we don't hate each other. That's okay. So if you want to write a bald-faced, objective account of the character and beliefs of Abraham Lincoln, that might not actually be best for your nation.
No, it might not. Hard as it is for, it might not. There have been in the recent news some, truth-telling about public figures. It vanishes. Nobody wants to hear it. It doesn't have any effect. It doesn't have any effect at all.
Should it? Like, if you can't actually, if a public figure has a certain lever of power in his hand, and you can't take his hand off the lever, why tell the damn story?
Maybe you shouldn't, but even if you did, it won't be attended to. It's a seductive thought to say, well, I'm going to stand here and say what I think is the truth, and gosh darn it, I'm going to change the world. That you probably won't.
Yeah.
You probably won't. You probably will get arrested, or nobody will listen to you. On the other hand, if you write a poem, well, nobody reads poetry anymore.
Yeah, so put it there. Put your truth there. That's a perfect place to put the truth.
If you make a song, I think recovering the aesthetic is a way to go.
Mm-hmm.
What do people consider to be beautiful? I said that weird, beautiful. More people are going to get that than are going to get your syllogisms.
Right.
One thing you can get from reading this Strauss is that it's very, very important who shapes the dominating opinions. That's more important than who comes up with the best argument.
Gates told me the other day that we should all eat fake meat.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Not listen to him. He's the president of the AV Club. Who cares what that asshole says? I don't understand.
Well, I think it would lead to the desertification of the entire middle of the country.
He might be all right with that. Actually, I don't think he will be, but he's now the largest owner of farmland in the United States. And then in the next weeks after everybody finds that out, he says, you shouldn't really eat meat. You ought to eat fake meat made out of soybeans. I own more soybean row crop land than anybody in the world. You should probably not eat meat. And then people listen to him. I don't even understand why he's on television. It's unbelievable. Strauss knew it. He says it on page 23.
There's your choices.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's your choices. You have your choice between A and A prime.
Do you think his family will eat fake meat?
You're trying to draw my esoteric thoughts out on Bill Gates. Yeah, I don't know. Ted Turner thought nobody should have more than 2 kids. And he has like 5.
He has 5, yeah.
Yeah. How'd you like to be the 3rd kid of Ted Turner? Yeah, so I thought this was a useful thing as a category of thought that writers don't always tell you what they think. Heck, songwriters don't always tell you what you think. The songs aren't always about what you think they're about. Knowing that gives you a clue. As far as bigger, what are you going to do with this in politics in 2021? I don't know. It might make you more attentive to what people say and why they say it and what they really mean, which might be different from what they say.
Right. Makes me want to not write. Thanks, Karl.
Well, I'm sorry. I mean, you can imagine. All right, so you're the earnest young writer, okay? And you say, I'm going to write a novel, and it's going to be about this noble moral truth that I've discovered. It's going to be about how, people shouldn't eat meat, I guess. I don't know. People should eat soy burgers.
Mm.
And then you write your novel. And on page 1, it says,
people shouldn't eat meat.
Johnny ate a hamburger and threw it up, and he decided that this was disgusting, and for the rest of time he was going to eat soy burger. You know, you're so obvious right away. All the good guys eat soy burgers, and all the bad guys eat steak. And you just make it this real heavy-handed... It's going to be the worst novel in the world.
A novel by Ernest Young. You said it was an Ernest Young writer. I like that.
An Ernest Young writer. Yeah, Ernest Young. He's terrible. But he's very sincere.
Right.
You know?
We're back to Maya Angelou again. Darn it.
Well, I was thinking Oscar Wilde, but people are more than arguments. I had to learn this. I really had to learn this.
I'm trying to learn it.
Gabriel Marcel says this once. You know that you might win the argument, lose the person. And that was a big clue for me.
I've got a bad case of the world police. Like, I want everybody to get it right, and I want them to get it right now. Yeah, that hadn't been working.
Well, and you still might be 100% right, okay?
Oh, I am.
Scottism is 100% right, okay. And you'd like Scottism to grow and have a little influence because 51% Scottism would be better than 0. So you might have to talk nice.
So here's one of the esoteric truths. I'm going to go ahead and say it out loud. Don't worry about a thing. Nothing's going to be all right. It just doesn't work. Nothing works, you know. Like, let's say that, you know, somebody has views that are 100% correct because of the opinions, which are the stuff of society, are set, because the number of people who are allowed to, you know, interject into the discourse is a set number of people, and so on. It doesn't matter if you're right or not. It can't get out there. It's the fallenness of man, Karl. We can't get it right. We're not allowed to get it right. We can't get it right. Until our prefrontal cortex is bigger or adrenals are different or something, we just can't get it right. It's just not going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, standing there, your bare naked logic, admit that I'm right.
Logical but not reasonable.
Yeah, it's not the best approach. That's an Asimov quote. See, he's doing a callback.
Yes.
To previous episodes.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed reading these. They were helpful to me. I should probably read them as a devotional every morning for Lent or something. Give up being right.
Come on, that's not what it means.
No, it's not. It's not. His writing style was difficult for me. I was like, are you doing that shit to me, Strauss? Are you doing that to me right now? It was hard for me to read. Yeah. And then reading this in conjunction with Bacon, who seems to be one of the first, like, modern people to me.
Mm-hmm.
He just has this thirst for the new and disdain for the old, and this overweening confidence. It's just unbelievable. You're like, good Lord, this guy's like, he's mentally ill to have the sort of confidence that he has. Anyway, so reading Strauss right next to that was really jarring. Not a fan of Bacon. Holy crap. Trust the science, Karl.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. You'll be done with him soon.
Trust the science.
You going to make me read it?
Oh, I should do that because I already have it done. Then you'll have to scramble.
Torture me.
Yeah. He's right about the problems with language and syllogism and getting the syllogism to map onto reality and all of those things. He's right about a lot of stuff. He discards prior analytics almost entirely. He's just, your syllogism, just take it and stuff it. And he just disparages in ad hominem Plato and Socrates. He doesn't take dialectic on like he does deductive reasoning. So I'd like to see what he has to say about dialectic, if he actually said anything. Because I don't know how you talk about these abstractions, these things that really matter, like virtue and justice and all that, without dialectic. There's no experiment, so I don't buy the social sciences thing. If language doesn't necessarily map well enough or tightly enough to make good syllogisms about the mating habits of polar bears, well, the demonstration or the experiment doesn't map well enough for social sciences in that way to tell us about truth and justice and beauty and virtue and all the things that matter.
I want to make a little clarification. I don't, in fact, think that those are matters merely of opinion.
Truth, virtue, etc.
Yeah, I don't think it's opinion. I don't think it's accessible to science, which for some people is going to mean, I guess that's just opinion. You can't approach it in that way. You can't reach a deduction and say, therefore, the fifth commandment. Right. It doesn't work that way. David Hume is great fun. He points this out. There's the distinction between the is and the ought. And then he makes a mistake, in my opinion, of thinking that the oughts don't really have any meaning. But you can't get from premises that say things are, you can't get a conclusion that says the way things ought to be. Right. And so people who think that science gives you morality are making a huge philosophical blunder. It does not. The fact that you mix whatever it is you mix to make gunpowder together does not tell you whom you should blow up.
Right. Sam Harris would say, well, I looked at a functional MRI, so people don't have free will. Also saying that there is no morality or there is no choice. It can't let us do that either. It's just a functional MRI. You saw a functional MRI. You're not a very special boy and you didn't see something that wasn't there. So stop it. Stop it.
Mm-hmm. And so to go back to Strauss, these things are not accessible to science anyway. He calls them opinions. I don't know if he actually thought they were opinions, mere opinions, but he calls them opinions, but you respect them. That lady in the church in Missouri, respect her opinions. They're probably righter than yours as far as how to act. You can't disprove her.
Do you love it when somebody says, well, you're entitled to your opinion?
Nobody ever says that to me.
Every now and then I'll get it. And I just get, I just makes me go into a white hot rage. I hate it. I hate that. You're entitled to your opinion.
I'll say you don't have to agree with me unless you want to be right.
Right. Charity, the other day, Charity's like, you just won't do anything unless it's your idea. I said, that's not true at all. It's just, if you see me act, it's because I've thought it through and I've come to some sort of a conclusion. And just because somebody else says something about it doesn't mean I'm going to do what they said, because I got here for reasons. I don't think I've ever done anything impulsively. So that looks like closed-mindedness on the outside, but they didn't see all the anguish before I actually undertook to move, going through all of that, opinion making, right? I had to come to some sort of a conclusion, and they couldn't see that. All they saw was me move. That sort of, well, you're entitled to your opinion. This is turning into counseling.
Well, some people put on opinions like they put on a hat.
Right.
Which is different. An opinion, the best judgment that you can possibly make about an action, we might call that an opinion because you're not 100% certain of it. But it's not like, who's the best looking Kardashian sister?
Oh, well, I know the answer to that.
Going to leave us in suspense?
Yeah, you could find it in one of my poems.
Well, I'm glad you liked it.
I did.
I've only read a few things by Strauss, but they were productive of much thought. So maybe they will be for you, dear listener.
So I've been on the Cato Gottfried podcast. And it's Joseph Cato and Paul Gottfried. You know, Paul Gottfried, paleocon extraordinaire.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote a book called Leo Strauss and the Conservative Movement in America, and it's been on my infinity list for a long time. This book offers an interpretation of the achievement of Leo Strauss, stressing how his ideas and followers reshaped the American conservative movement. According to this study, Strauss and his disciples came to influence the established right almost by accident. The conservative movement that reached out to Strauss and his legacy was extremely fluid and lacked a blah, 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 blah. But I have a great deal of respect for Gottfried, and although I typically don't read a book about a book, him being an acquaintance and the book only being 194 pages, I'm tempted to read that one.
I haven't really followed up any of the Straussian connections in politics. It was of no concern to me. I just wanted to know what he said about Plato.
Right. Paul Gottfried. What a smart dude he is. Next week, we're going to read that one book by that guy from Monty Python.
No, he's not from Monty Python.
Terry
Pratchett.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Terry Pratchett wrote something like 45 Discworld novels. They keep getting better and better. He won't write any more, though, because he died. But I just read it.
Yeah, I look forward to it. What's going to be next, though? What's going to be after that?
I don't know. You wanted an essay.
Yeah, we need something short. A little palate cleanser, a little cucumber sandwich of a thing.
Yeah, I'll have to think about something.
Schopenhauer on
How long is
women.
that Schubert on music? Is that a book or is it an essay?
That's a book.
Hmm.
We could read Schopenhauer on women and just get canceled.
Maybe we ought not do that.
Oh.
I don't know. I'll dig something up.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I don't know how thick it is. I was thinking Milman Perry on Homer.
Oh.
But I don't know how thick that is. We'll figure something out.
So we did decide that we're going to read Pratchett next week. We'll pick out a little essay, stand by for that. And then the week after that one, we'll cover the E.F. Schumacher book, Small is Beautiful, right? I think that's the one. And then the week after that, we will not be reading Catcher in the Rye. Yeah. Pass this on.
Right.
Our enrollment for Online Great Books will be opening here shortly. Go watch out for that if you want to go sit through a seminar and have Karl lie to you constructively in order to make you a better person. You could do that with us at onlinegreatbooks.com/podcast. And then as soon as enrollment opens, I will send you first crack at getting in and a discount code so that you save a few bucks. And listen, if you want to join and pay with Bitcoin, you can email support at onlinegreatbooks.com and we'll make that happen. And we give you 10% off. How about that?
Wow.
Go to your favorite whatever, Spotify, and hit the share button and send a link to this to your mom. Your mom's my demographic. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Yeah, every little bit helps. It's hard to... we've got a nice audience. We'd like to be a little bit bigger. So if you helped, we'd be thankful.
Yeah, it's just harder all the time. There's just thousands of podcasts are created every day. When I first started doing podcasts, I didn't know anybody that did them. And now I know tons of people. Part of it's because I do podcasts, but just lots of people are like, oh, I own a janitorial service and I have the janitorial and sparkling tile podcast. Everybody's got one. It's interesting. We'll find out what's next, though, in mass media. It's going to be postcards again, Karl. That's the next big thing. Thank you, guys.